the postponed Tisha B'Av in the afternoon after Chatzos, where we were already allowed to say Tillin, we're not to daven, but on Tefillin and so on. So let us first start with Shir Lamada says, Eina Lehorem An Yovi Ezri Mim Adonai Oisei Shemaim V'Oretz Ali Tena Beit Raglecha Al Yonim Shemrecha Nilo Yona V'Lishon Shomi Yisrael Adonai Shemrecha Adonai Tzilcha Al Yad Yiminecha Yom Yom Hashem Shlo Yakeko V'Yorech Ba'aloi Lo Adonai Yishmocha Mikol Roi Yishmer Es Nafshecha Adonai Yishmotzi Yisro V'Yecho Me'ato V'Yad Oilom. In a talk that the Rebbe gave in 5748 Tavshim Memches Shnas Tismach, the Rebbe suggested and said that on a Tisha B'Av particular like this, where it is postponed, we have to strengthen ourselves in our belief of the coming of Mashiach now. Because as we know, as it says, that on the day of Tisha B'Av, Mashiach was born. So when we find ourselves the day after Mashiach, we can get extremely, extremely disappointed. Since he was born, and as the Rebbe points out, we're not talking about the physical sense of born, because if he's just born, he can't really help us much. So what we're talking about, Tisha B'Av is born, that Mashiach is being revealed on the day of Tisha B'Av. In a spiritual sense, this is the day of his birth, it's the day of his revelation. So, when we find ourselves the day after Tisha B'Av, we can ask the question, no, so what's happening? You revealed. Why don't you take us out of Golus? Says the Rebbe that the question is a very good question, but the question is still Golus. So what do we need to do? We need to focus on the positive. We need to focus on the action that we need to do to hasten it. And as such, the Rebbe says that this is a day that we should give additional tzedakah. So my friends, actually, I call upon you right now, as you're listening, or right after that, please take a few coins, throw them in the pushka, and as the Rebbe says clearly, this mitzvah hastens the coming of Mashiach. So instead of focusing on the sadness, we should focus on the tachlis. Not just, nu, why don't you come? Which is important, obviously. But, nu, what do I need to do? So what do we need to do? Learning more Torah. Strengthening in our belief. Strengthening in Ahavas Yisrael. As we just said, adding more tzedakah. And it's certain that any second we will not say, nu for the past, say, nu, it happened. So talking about Dvar Torah, Tisha B'Av is a kind of a dichotomy. It is the saddest day of the year, yet at the same time, it is called the Moyed. It is called Yom Tov. Ikra Moyed. Tisha B'Av is called the Yom Tov. Why? Because as we know, the day will be transformed into Yom Tov. So we're calling it already now as a Yom Tov for what is going to happen in the future. But this is a difficult task. How do we celebrate the Yom Tov in middle fasting? How do we celebrate the Yom Tov when we just sat for hours and said kinnis? But it all depends on the perspective where a person places himself. The Baal Shem Tov says, a person actually is there where he wants to be. So when a person places himself in the perspective of Geula, in the perspective of redemption, and realizing that this which the Gemara tells the story, that this farmer who was farming and a Gentile came by and told him, stop farming because your temple was just destroyed. He heard it in the sound that a cow made. So now that this person is extremely, extremely distraught, the farmer tells him, hold a second, continue. I just heard another sound. And the sound was that Noilad Mashiach Shel Yisrael. What is the Talmud telling us over here? What is the Talmud telling us? Stop working, continue working. The cow made a sound. The Arab is telling him. But what the Talmud is telling us over here, there is a perspective where a person places itself. You can either place yourself in the sounds of destruction, or you can place yourself in the sounds of rebuilding. And especially today, when we think of what's happening in Eretz Yisrael, then once again there is this challenge that our brethren in Eretz Yisrael are going through. So we can go through the sounds of the fright, the sounds of the sirens of frightening us, or we can see the sounds of success. So says Tisha B'Av, listen to the sounds of redemption. While you hear also some background noise of exile, focus on the redemption. And this way, we will, the Mirza Hashem, merit today, a day late, but now, immediately, the coming and the revelation of Mashiach and the dancing in the Beis HaMikdash.